our program this morning, we're going to start with Tharusha. Tharusha is going to give us an overview of the POPI Act and its links and how important it is for us in business.
Thank you very much, Cherie. Okay, so we have here now the POPI Act. Okay, so it's the Protection of Personal Information Act. So it's also called POPIA. And but everybody's just been referring to it as POPI. So just to keep in line with things, I will do the same. So moving on, who am I? People always like to know that whoever they're speaking to has some sort of background. So just very quickly, I am a certified internal auditor and risk manager. I also practice as a tax professional business accountant. I have many years experience in private and public sectors across most industries. And what I'm really passionate about is using all of my skills, all of my experience in offering solutions to business challenges, to all sorts of challenges, operational systems, processes, programs, all of that. I love assisting employers to realize that they're actually on an adventure being in business as opposed to just a means to an end. So that's a bit about me, in case you were wondering. And now we can move on. I just at this point want to take a poll to see how well do you know papaya at this point? Like right now, how well do you know it? I think Ali is going to put up our poll for us. Yes, there we go. If you could just go through that quickly and let's get a feel in the room to see how we're doing. So while we're waiting for that to come in, I'm just going to go on to the next slide. So why POPI? What's the purpose of the act? The purpose of the act is to give effect to the constitutional right, because all of us have constitutional rights. Half of us don't know what rights we actually have, but we have quite a lot of constitutional rights. And one of our rights is a right to privacy, by safeguarding personal information when it's processed by a responsible party. And it's subject to justifiable limitations that are aimed at balancing the right to privacy against other rights, particularly the right of access to information, among other things. Okay, so in English, what it's saying is we all have a right to privacy. From time to time, we need to give out our personal information to responsible parties like banks and other businesses and whichever other organizations we might seek some help from, including the medical industry. And there's an unspoken, until now, unspoken trust that those people are going to keep your information safe, that they are going to be responsible about it. So I see our poll results are up. So let's just have a look at that. A whopping 73%. Help, I don't know what to do. That's why you're here. And we are going to make good progress on that. There is a need for people to have our information, and we trust that information to them to be used appropriately. Okay. On some forms, like if you're going to have an operation, they say, do you consent? And you say yes. And then on other forms, they say, maybe use your information for marketing, and you say yes or no. Okay. Now, this is far bigger than that. This is the government taking our personal information very, very seriously and saying, listen, if you, for whatever valid reason, need the information of our citizens, we need to make sure that you are going to keep it very safe, that you are going to make sure that there are protocols in place that safeguard such information because our citizens are at risk. Cybercrime is on the increase like never before. Identity theft, unmarried people going to get registered to be married and finding out they're already married. That type of thing happens. And we've got to make sure that we safeguard it against that. And we should be thankful that our government is actually putting this in place now, even though it is quite daunting for us as employers or business owners or the people in charge at various organizations. It's really for the betterment of every single one of us. So many have asked why the act is in place. What is government trying to get out of it? Are they trying to get our own personal information? What are they planning to do with it, etc.? But this is what it is. It is getting our personal information protected. And hopefully this also means that you'll get less spam callers and telemarketers phoning you and interrupting your day when you're expecting to be busy doing other things. So this is a little thing that I put together to show you the link between PIA and POPI. So PIA is Promotion of Access to Information Act, okay? And it used to be compulsory for just a select few, mainly larger organizations who met certain criteria and things like that. Now it has become mandatory for every single organization to have a PIA manual. And what they've done is now they've included the PIA manual into the POPI manual because they are so interrelated. So why are they related? Okay. First of all, in the Constitution, it talks about the promotion of it talks about keeping our information private, right? So I've just put up there very quickly, section 14, everyone has a right to privacy, which includes the right to protection against unlawful collection, retention, etc. Okay, so PIA was created to meet section 14 of the Constitution. Okay, section 32 of the Constitution says everyone has a right of access to any information held by the state or any other person for the protection of any rights that were referred to in PIA. Okay, so this is the link between the two to say what do we have for PIA, what do we have for POPI, what are the reasons for having them. Okay, so as you can see, it's actually a very good thing to have our information protected and that the government is going to hold people responsible for misusing your information. So what I'm trying to do in my presentation today is I'm trying to help you see the principles and the logic behind the act, because I believe when we understand something and we understand how things link together, we are in a far better position to put together our manuals and our working ability to implement everything that needs to be implemented. So I'm looking to give you the principles because the act is very vast and I can't possibly cover everything right now. But I'm wanting to just give you those special links that you would find helpful and help you to put everything together. And then from there, we've got the security aspect, digital security, and from an HR point of view, which the other two speakers will do. So hopefully, if you can just work with me here, and we can get through that. So yes, it is a mission to complete the manuals, but hopefully you can see the good for the greater humanity, as it were. And you may find yourself protected as an individual. And as we said, cybercrime is on the increase. So moving on then to our next slide. So the PIA manual has to be included in your POPIA manual, okay? So the PIA manual is one that every private and public body must prepare and publish in terms of the act, okay? And it also needs to be submitted to the information regulator and talk of all the information that you collect, and that you must make sure that you get consent prior to doing that. So in terms of the Constitution, all people in South Africa, including non-nationals, can request information from public and private bodies. Now, it doesn't mean that any Tom, Dick, and Harry can come knocking on your door and say, I want to see your financials right now or else. It's nothing like that. They're very set instances where your information can be requested to be seen. And that's all documented in the Act. If you're wanting to know more along those lines, you can pop me an email and I will let you know. So the important parts of PIA. So as we said, right of access to records, and that you comply with the procedural requirements relating to any request for access to that record, and that access is not refused when it's required. So what does a private body mean? Because PIA is always talking about a private body. Okay, so it's a natural person who carries on any trade, business, or profession. A partnership, likewise, carrying on a trade. Formal existing juristic person. Juristic persons being, for instance, trusts or any organization that's put together that's a separate legal entity. Okay, but it excludes a public body. So a public body are all the government institutions. All right. So just a quick note on this. How do your manuals comply to your PIA and how do you compile your PIA and POPI manuals? Two basic steps. Okay. So here what I'm doing is a bit of a reconciliation between PIA and POPI, right? In PIA, what we're talking about is what information does your company currently hold in order to operate efficiently? Whether it's medical records, the gender of people, their race, their religion, their, and then the obvious, the ID numbers, the names, whatever. There's a whole host of things that are considered personal information. Even if you know the person's next of kin, if you know their spouse, if you know their ex-spouse, all that sort of information is what they're talking about. So you need to, in terms of PIA, scrutinize what you have and determine if you have any information that you don't need. So if you had a form filled out and somebody wrote a long story about my ex's name is whatever, and the reason we were divorced is because of this financial transaction that happened, and lists the two companies, you do not need to know that. Shred it, destroy it, burn it. You do not need to keep it on hand. So if you don't need it, get rid of it. And when I say get rid of it, I don't mean just take it and throw it in the rubbish bin. That's not considered getting rid of it. Getting rid of it means shredding it, burning it, destroying it, or if it's digital, I'm sure Sunil will touch on that, on how to make sure that your digital information is removed completely, because we all know you can format your hard drive and resell it, but people can access what is or what was on your computer as well. Sunil can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm pretty sure it's not scrubbed properly just with the format. So if you're going to resell a computer, you need to be careful. The more unnecessary information you keep, the higher your risk. Also, you only want to keep information for the time that you need it, and then you don't want it anymore. So you can either destroy it, or if you still need the records of it, you can return it to your clients and say, I'm handing this back to you. Here's a little, so we have it in writing. Here it is. Please acknowledge that I'm handing all your documents back to you. There may be an instance, for example, with us, where SARS decides to do an audit 6 years back, and we might have reason to request this information from you, but we do not want to keep it in our office. So you want to keep as little information as you possibly can. With POPI, now that we've identified all the types of information that we have, what we actually need, what we don't need, what we don't want, okay, how are you going to protect the information that you just mentioned? What are you going to do to safeguard that information? You can lock it in cabinets and make sure that you have a control sheet that whoever accesses the key needs to fill in their name and the time that they accessed it. You can have safes, but when you have all of these procedures, you need to document it in a way that says, yes, I have a control. I have a locked cupboard that things stay in. Okay, but how are you making sure that that door is always locked? Point one. Point two, who has keys to that? And sometimes what companies do is they lock the cupboard and they put the key with a bit of press stick under the desk. Okay, I've seen it. So if anybody happens to be in the room at the time when they're sticking the key back, they could see what you're doing. They could see now where the key is and access the cupboard. Okay. So POPI is saying, how are you going to protect the information, not just in words, but how are you going to implement it? They want a process of how you are going to go about protecting all this information that you have. What IT controls, what controlled access areas will you have? Like literally lock and key on a gate. How will you limit access to it? How will you keep a log of who's been in there at what time so you can hold people accountable? It is the responsibility of the information officer to ensure that the personal data is safe and secured. So the buck stops with the information officer. They are ultimately responsible, but they're also responsible now to train every staff member or have them trained on what they can and can't do in terms of POPI. So um, the process is large, but it makes sense. It needs to happen because at the end of the day, you don't want your clients having their identity stolen or having their bank account cleaned out. So it's a safeguard against you as well. Okay. So that is a simple reconciliation between the two manuals to help you understand the rationale behind these acts. What do you have and how will you protect it? Okay. So above all else, we need to apply logic. So that is what I'm trying to enable you to do, is to apply the logic so you can see why you're doing what you're doing, because it's very difficult when you don't know why you're doing something, but you're told you have to do it and you have to hand it in by a certain date. So that shows the reconciliation with the two and the principle that needs to be applied throughout. The top tip that I have for you, as I get to the end of my presentation, is the easiest, most painless, and effective way to complete your manuals and remain compliant is to change your mindset from seeing POPI and PIA as a necessary evil to something that can bring you brilliant ideas as you delve into what you have and how you could expand or diversify your businesses, because now you're being forced to look at every aspect of your business. And often people don't do that. People don't do business plans. They just kind of go all in and try and make sure that everything is there so that you can make some money. As business owners, we don't want to make some money. We want to create wealth. We want to see profits. So once we're now being kind of forced into looking at every aspect, you can see how you can improve your systems and processes, improve your efficiencies and the effectiveness of what you're doing, save money, save time in what you're doing, and streamline your day-to-day processes. And it will save you time, it'll save you money. And if we add hope to the mix that I just spoke about, then we can really see your profits grow as well. So look at it with a positive mindset. Look at it as something that, you know what, I'm now being forced to look at everything that I need to do. I'm going to look at it with an open mind, and I'm going to find more ways to make my business more efficient and effective in everything that we do. So I'm just going to touch on this very, very briefly, because as I say, it is quite a lot. But the minimum information that you need to have in your manual, okay, is the appointment of the information officer, okay, the training, all those responsible for receiving and using personal information to avoid data breaches. In terms of training, you also need a roster and an attendance register, who has been trained, what date they have been trained, excuse me, and who trained them. Okay, so they need to make sure that they understand that. Strategic risk management. Have you identified all the risks in your business and what are you doing about it, especially in terms of losing personal information? Data mapping. What's the information flow of data through the organization so you can assess risks at the different points? Because every time there's a flow from one department to the next, there are new risks that arise and you need to be aware of that. The employee information, there's quite a lot, which Cindy is going to touch on. Privacy policy, Sunil's also going to be touching on that. Incident management, if there's a breach, there's what they call a self-whistleblowing system where you have to inform the regulator that there's been a breach. It doesn't mean that you will automatically get a fine. They will probably send out an investigative team to find out what happened. So long as you can prove that you had proper manuals in place, etc., and you have taken every reasonable step to make sure that your data is safe, they will not fine you. They can actually tell the complainant that the organization is as tight as it can be, and it's unfortunate because where there's a will, there's a way. So we got to protect ourselves just as far as we can. Contents are very important for all bits of information that you have about everybody. So make sure you get that right as well. And there is other information pertinent to your organization. You need to start putting that in as well. So lastly, an important point to note is that the POPI manual is not once off, okay? It is a working manual. So as processes change in your company, as you're going to use information for different things, as you're going to diversify, the manual has to be updated as you go, and an updated manual needs to be lodged with the information regulator. Also note, if someone gives you consent to have their personal information for a specific use, because remember, you also have to write down why you have that information. And you decide when you're diversifying your business, or you have a friend who has another business who could use that contact or whatever, that is now a change in intent of why you had that information. If you do that, you need another consent letter from your client, or some sort of way that you can prove that that they have consented to you giving their contact details to somebody else.